Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a dramatic move that could reshape how the US Congress handles trillions of dollars in tax policy. What lies at the heart of the issue? This is a 3.8 trillion with a T, trillion dollar question, and one that critics say could blow a hole in the federal budget, all while sidestepping any real accountability. Believe it or not, but in other words, this is of course the usual course of business in Washington, many would argue. Let's dive into what's happening and why economists, budget analysts, and fiscal watchdogs are now sounding the alarm. Many Senate Republicans are pushing to make President Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent. Now, that alone isn't new, but how they're trying to do it is new. That's where the real controversy begins. They're using a little-known but very, very powerful legislative tool called reconciliation. What is reconciliation in this context? It is a fast-track process that lets a bill bypass the 60-vote filibuster threshold in the Senate. That means that they can pass this without a single Democratic vote. Now, here's the twist. Under standard budget rules, lawmakers must show how a bill impacts the federal deficit, the federal budget, compared to current law. This is why it's so controversial. There has to be transparency. There has to be accountability. If the 2017 tax cuts are scheduled to expire in 2025, extending them beyond that should cost money, a lot of it. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, keeping them in place another decade would add $3.8 trillion to the federal deficit. $3.8 trillion to the federal deficit that's already out of control. And this is precisely why I said in the very beginning of the video, I said we're going to discuss a $3.8 trillion dilemma. But many Senate Republicans are trying to flip the script now, and this has nothing to do with being a Republican or a Democrat. It has everything to do with transparency and accountability. There are people who are actively voicing concerns. The most prominent voice of reason is, of course, Congressman Thomas Massie. But many Republicans want to assume that the tax cuts never, ever expire, that they're already baked into the law. And if that assumption is accepted, then making the cuts permanent technically costs nothing. You know, it is like saying that you're not spending anything at all because you were already planning to spend it all. I know it's flawed logic, I understand, but it frequently works in Washington. This move would actually wipe away years of fiscal safeguards that were designed to keep lawmakers from enacting expensive policies without acknowledging their costs. Economists warn that using this method sets a very dangerous precedent. In effect, any majority party, the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, could create temporary tax breaks, claim that they're standard policy, and then just make them permanent later, all without a proper accounting of the cost to the national debt. Garrett Watson, a policy analyst at the Tax Foundation, calls it what it is. He says this is an undercutting of the budget rules that exist to prevent exactly this sort of sleight of hand. And the $3.8 trillion won't just vanish. Someone, our future generations, future taxpayers, will have to foot the bill. So what does this mean for the US economy today? Let's look at the numbers. A preliminary analysis says the Senate bill would cost $3.9 trillion over the next 10 years, even after accounting for any positive economic effects. Meanwhile, the latest estimate from the Congressional Budget Office pegs the House version of the bill at $2.8 trillion in added deficits over a decade. So these, of course, aren't small numbers. They matter for the federal debt, which is already climbing toward record levels as a share of GDP. In fact, federal debt is out of control at this point in time, and we shouldn't just blame Trump because prior administrations are responsible for deficits too, for fiscal irresponsibility. And here's another layer to the story: investor confidence. If the US is seen as abandoning fiscal discipline, which of course it is clearly on track to do officially, ignoring the cost of massive tax cuts could shake faith in long-term US treasuries. And this is terrible news. That means higher interest rates. It means you're going to spend more than $1 trillion to service your debt, which that interest cost has already surpassed $1 trillion per year. It also means heavier debt burden moving forward and more risk for everyone. Even though the Senate hasn't ruled yet on whether this accounting change is allowed under budget rules, many fiscal experts say that approving this change would be a big mistake. According to Brendan Duke at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, this maneuver ensures that the cost of the tax cuts from 2026 and beyond never get counted. That's not just bending the rules, it is rewriting them. Republicans argue that the issue isn't taxes, it is spending. Senate Finance Committee Chair said in a statement that extending the Trump tax cuts simply prevents a $4 trillion tax hike. In other words, keeping tax rates low isn't a change, it's just preventing them from going up. But even this line of reasoning raises a critical question: what happens when future Congresses try the same approach with even larger tax or spending bills? What happens then? If this tactic works now, it becomes a template for future legislators, Republicans or Democrats. This is about transparency. Democrats could use the same maneuver in the future to make their own tax credits or entitlement expansions permanent without accounting for the cost. The door is open now for all sorts of shady accounting practices, and once it's opened, it may never close again. Let's not forget the fine print of the bill itself. The Senate draft would make 3 business tax breaks permanent, pare back breaks for workers, and even make deeper cuts to Medicaid than the House version. The cap on state and local tax deductions, a hot topic in high-tax states, of course, is expected to be lowered from the $40,000 threshold that is set in the House bill. Also, certain tax breaks, like those on tipped wages and overtime, are limited to just 4 years in the bill. But under this new baseline assumption, Congress could actually extend them indefinitely later without any new cost on paper. This is a budget illusion, and one that could be repeated again and again. The problem is that this move would do away with budget transparency, and that's the main issue. In the short term, Republicans may feel confident in pushing this through, but in the long run, when political control flips, and it always does, the same tool could be used to pass even more costly programs without fiscal guardrails, without any fiscal responsibility. The unintended consequences are real, and they're not just political, they're financial. So what's the bottom line here? This isn't just a debate about tax cuts. It's about whether we're going to keep pretending that big policy decisions don't have real price tags. It's about understanding what we're doing and the implications of our actions. It's about whether we let parties in power rewrite the fiscal rules to suit their agenda. And it is about whether future generations will be stuck with the bill for political conveniences made today. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Is this a smart political move or a dangerous fiscal gamble? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember that you can always get early access to my content and watch it ad-free on Patreon. You will find it linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Bye for now.